Well, hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for another lunch in this digital life where we talk about some of the quirks and quarks of working in digital media. I am Jane, I'm the founder of I'm at Events. We do social media for events as well as a slew of other things in digital media. I'm here with my team.
Hey, I'm Steph. I'm the digital media specialist here at I'm at Events.
And I'm Tina, and I'm the senior social media specialist.
Yes, so we wanted to talk about, this is a conversation that we have a lot with each other, and so we thought we'd kind of share some of our thoughts and tips with you, but we talk a lot about work-life balance, which is, I think, a pretty common kind of catchphrase that people use now. And how do you achieve that, especially when you're working in a really unstructured environment? When you work in digital media, you can work from anywhere, you can work anytime, and so that tends to mean that you're working all the time. So how do you stay sane working in this field where you can basically be working just nonstop all the time? And I was on a show a little while ago where they asked me this question, you know, how do you achieve balance working in this nonstop industry where you're working all the time? And it got cut out of the final episode. But I said, well, I don't. I mean, just to be perfectly honest, I don't feel like I do. I feel like I actually gave up on trying to achieve balance because it just feels like this word that doesn't mean anything anymore. And there's so much that's kind of attached to that, where balance seems to be this thing where it's like, okay, that's another thing to add to my list of things to do today. I need to achieve balance. And then when you don't feel like you're achieving it, it's like somehow you're failing, you're not working right. You know, if you're not achieving this perfect kind of work-life balance. And we were just talking about this, but to me, part of the mythical thing of work-life balance is that, you know, we're taught and trained and educated our entire lives to value, you know, achievement, to value and place importance on working, right? And we spend so much of our life working, and so that's become a really important thing culturally for us. So when that's the case, when that's what we're sort of trained to believe and do, and then you get to a point where it's like you're trying to achieve balance, it's like I feel like fundamentally we're setting ourselves up for failure.
For sure.
In that. So for me, I think it's a lot less about, you know, how do I achieve balance? Because for me, that it just doesn't seem plausible. You know, like I'm running a business. I have a family. I've got 3 kids. I've got a household. I have a class to teach. You know, I've speaking gigs. I've got all of these various balls in the air, and that's not to mention like family, friends, and you know. All that, right? So to try and seek balance in all of that seems sort of like, not realistic to me. Yeah. So instead of balance, I think what I try to do is think about how to be really conscious in the decisions I make about how I'm going to shape my life, instead of having work kind of shape me and dictate what my life is going to look like. And that's really a luxury, I think, that we have, you know, working in digital media, that you get to make that choice, because a lot of people don't have that choice, which for me, again, is part of like what makes it silly even talking about work-life balance, is that there are plenty of people out there who have jobs where like it isn't realistic. And I think that we've moved into this sort of area where we talk about, and I call this out all the time, like people who say when you do what you love, it doesn't feel like work. And to me, that's just like, okay, I'm sure there are any number of people with jobs in the world where if you said that to them, they would laugh in your face, because it's just silly, right? Like there are plenty of jobs that feel like work, and there are a lot of jobs that need to be done that are hard work, and work doesn't necessarily need to mean something negative either, right? Like we put in, you know, sometimes super long days, and like at the end of that day, you feel like it was work, you know, you put in a hard day, and that's not wrong. So yeah, for me, I feel like I've kind of taken myself out of the, you know, seeking balance game, and just tried to be as conscious as I can in kind of a chaotic life and environment to shape my life as best I can. But I know, I mean, that's not a really solid tip in terms of anybody out there, you know, how do you achieve a better work-life balance? I feel like you guys have some really tangible things that you guys do that you've shared with me too, that are like, these are really good ways to help bring that back, to help make you feel more grounded and sane. So I'd love for you guys to share some of your tips. So I think you have some really, really good, solid tips to be able to do that, to have some balance.
For sure. And I think I want to add to that as well. When we say work-life balance, I think the impression is that it's an equilibrium. It's
Yes,
50%
yeah.
work, it's 50% life, but that's not the case at all. I mean, there's so many
For
different
sure.
levels to that depending on who you are, what kind of job you have, the kind of commitments, your relationships, everything that plays into it. So maybe your work is 30% and maybe your family is 50%. It looks completely different for everyone. So I think when you're trying to understand your work-life balance, it's about understanding what works for you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because when you say balance, I think that's maybe what bothers me about that word is because it automatically, it gives you a sense of like, 50-50, like it's like, and that's not the way that it kind of plays out in reality.
Yeah, and that shifts from day to day, of course, too, right?
Yes, yeah, and certainly in digital media, it's a pretty ever-changing thing. And you were just talking about this actually before we started. This was, our job can look really different. One day we're doing this, we're meeting and chatting, working on client stuff. Some days you're working from home. Some days you're on site at an event or with clients. Like work can look a lot of different ways. So that in itself is kind of challenging too, because it can throw, when you do have habits, it can kind of throw your habits off a bit.
Yeah.
Too, right?
So for that, I guess, like, you have to be adaptable, of course, like in those
Yeah.
kinds of situations. But on just a regular day when I'm working from home, I really make a point to create a schedule. So for me, like the kind of main things are I make sure I have a morning routine. So I do a meditation, I eat my breakfast, and then I start work. So I always prioritize that kind of time and space for myself to just collect, after I've woken up. But also just things like, making sure you eat lunch before a certain time. When we work from home, sometimes you get so focused and caught up on doing things that, those kinds of things just lose priority, and you just, it's 5 and you're like, oh, like I haven't eaten yet. So for me, it's still pretty late, but I make sure that I eat lunch before 3. So it's usually like 2:30 that I'll eat. And then especially at the end of the night as well, to make sure that I stop working at a certain time. So for me, that's around 8:39. Again, like you have to be adaptable, and like sometimes things come up, so you have to shift that a little bit sometimes. But I always make sure to stop work at 8:30, and then from then on, I do kind of like my wind down routine, which is kind of that definitive line for me where that was work, and now this is my life / relaxation / wind down.
Yeah. I think that's excellent. I have to say I'm not very good.
Yeah, me
at doing
either.
that.
I'm not good at all.
I do, and I mean it's probably more often than not where I find I get to dinner time and it's like I totally haven't eaten all day. I've been drinking coffee, but I've not eaten all day. That happens pretty frequently. I know it's not great. It's certainly something that I've tried to get better about too, is, reminding myself of the importance of doing things like that. But it's so easy to just keep going, keep ticking things off your list. There's never a shortage of work, of things to do, of needs to fill. So I think, that's an amazing tip and really important, is to have those habits that, that get you to do the things that you should be doing to take care of yourself. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I would say my favorite tip is kind of knowing when you're most productive. And because in the scheduled and more structured world, you're working 9 to 5, but maybe you're more productive at night, or maybe you have something to do that day. So you can always move around your time. So I find if I haven't seen, say, my mom for a week and we can have lunch in the morning, then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to move my day around, and always make sure that you are making time for all those important things as well, but you're getting your stuff done. So that's kind of where the unstructured life is good, because you can move things around and you can still throw in a hobby that you want to get done that day, or like a friend you haven't seen in a long time. That kind of blends into my next one, where working in this digital world, and if you work from home, you can kind of get a little bit stir crazy sometimes. So when you can find someone who works in kind of the same industry, and maybe that's how you're spending time with your friend. You guys are both catching up, but you're also banging things off your to-do list, and then you can also brainstorm with them as well.
Yeah. I think especially when, working in social media is it's a highly creative job, right? You're doing a lot of content creation. So you need to be able to feed that creativity, which can be really hard. And so I like going back to what you said about, finding the times of day that you're productive in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. Because for some of us, you get up in the morning, and first thing in the morning, you're able to tackle, analytical tasks, but maybe not creative tasks. Mm-hmm. So understanding, what time of day you're better at certain things, I think is really important. And that can change from day to day, and it's different from person to person. So I don't think it's right to say, this is what it should be, or this is how you should look at it, because it's so different from person to person. Oh. And we got a question here from my brother, actually.
Hello.
Hi, Jesse. And he's saying, do you have rules about how much time you spend on social daily? This is honestly, I wanted to talk about this anyway, so thanks for asking this, because I think it is really important. For me, one of the things that I've had to get a lot better at, and this is getting more true lately, I find, recently I've been spending a lot of time being very conscious about the amount of time that I spend on social media. Because we work in social media, you could spend all day looking at social media, and in a way you almost have to, because you have to understand what's trending, you have to know what's going on, and figure out whether or not you're going to be part of the commentary around it. And so it's important to spend a lot of time online, and at the same time it can just make you absolutely crazy and be a time sucker and not efficient, really, towards what you need to accomplish. So for me, I've been taking back my weekends a lot recently.
Take back the weekend.
Taking back the weekend. I was reading an article, and you might have seen this floating around out there, about how it took us a century to instate the weekend, and it's taken us less than a decade to undo it. And so that was really interesting to me, because I have found that for us, you can work right through the weekend easily. And that, to me, I kind of reached a point where I thought, you know what, there has to be some time that I observe regularly where I'm consciously not looking at my phone as much. It doesn't mean I don't look at it at all, because I can't. But the weekends for me, if we're not covering an event, because if we are covering an event, obviously we have to work through the weekends. But when we don't, and there's nothing urgent, I make that decision to not be looking at my devices, to not open my laptop through the weekend. I'll certainly check to see if there's anything urgent that I need to address, or anyone that I need to respond to. But otherwise, I leave things that can wait until Monday, and I can have time with my family, and time away from that online space, which can really get to you. Depending on what's going on. We've talked about this before. But depending on what's happening online, you might be absorbing a lot, right? You're absorbing a lot of people's emotions anyway when you're online. And that's something that I think people really tend to underestimate. They don't think about that. Being online all the time, you're getting a constant feed of people's beliefs and emotions. And especially if you're an empathetic person, which I would like to consider myself as, that can be really hard just on its own. So I think individually we limit our social media use to a certain degree. For me, again, the weekends have become a time for me to unplug not entirely, but
you're getting there.
Yes, yeah. And I think I've gotten better too about my family goes away for 1 week in the summer. Every year we go to the Canadian equivalent of Kellerman's from Dirty Dancing, and so for that week, again, it's just trying to make a conscious decision not to be constantly staring at my device. And that's true just on a day-to-day basis, because I find that a lot of us now are spending so much time looking at our devices, we're missing some of the things that are happening in front of us.
Oh, 100%.
So that's that's not a very rigid sort of limitation, but that's one of the ways that I kind of try to manage my social media use for sure.
And for me too, I have this little, it's obviously the weekends are important, but just throughout the day, like if I'm going to the grocery store or if I'm popping into the mall to just do a quick errand, I don't bring my phone. There's nothing that can happen within that 15 minutes that is so urgent that once I get back into my car in the 15 minutes that I can't
handle
address.
that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right? So just even time like that where it's like I'm, instead of standing in line on my phone, I'm, looking at whatever's in front of me or having a conversation that I might have missed because I was on my phone. So
yes.
I think that is a little habit like I try to do as well.
Well, and we talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, but, I went into a store recently and the person who was helping me had to go and find something. And it was just, like your natural inclination is to go, oh, I'm going to look at my phone. Like it gives you something to do, right? And I went, you know what? I'm not going to. It might feel a little awkward, but I'm going to stand here and wait and I'll look around. But in doing that more and more, it's like getting back to feeling comfortable with having moments that aren't absorbed by what's happening online. And I think like what you're saying, like going into a store or whatever it is, if it's something, little things where you would usually take your phone with you, going, you know what, maybe I'm not going to do that. I'll just have the moment without that. It helps, I don't know, bring back again a little bit of sanity and being comfortable in moments of not having something to do constantly, right? Or not being entertained constantly. And I think that helps to slow things down a little bit too.
Yeah, 100%.
So one of the things that taking back the weekend has been kind of one of my things, but I also, one of the things that I kind of geek out about is creating efficiencies, and that's something that I don't know, I just sort of adapted in my work life, but I'll use this sort of as an example because we talked about doing videos for the longest time. We did. And, I got myself all worked up about it because I was like, okay, we have to have, the perfect set. We have to have the perfect lighting. We have to, have all these scripts written out. And you just, you want to deliver something of quality and something that's valuable. But in the process of doing that, I just spent so much time on this video series. And then, our team time is this. Like, we have these conversations anyway. So we sort of went, let's just flip on the camera and we'll start doing it. And so to me, it was like we were already having the conversations, and now we're having them a little more broadly. Now we want to share that with you. So it accomplishes the video series, and while we're doing something we would already be doing. Mm-hmm. So that to me, it's like it alleviated a lot. It created an efficiency. So when you can find one thing that accomplishes multiple things, that to me is where it's at, right? It's like that helps to give you back a lot of time and a lot of balance and energy that would have been absorbed trying to do too many things at the same time.
Yeah. And then probably an important thing for me as well is, so I said earlier that at 8:30 I kind of cut things off, and then I have this wind down routine that I do. So part of that is just, we always hear about, having a to-do list for the day and writing that down and kind of running through your task for the day. But for me, also at the end of the day, I make sure to kind of revise and take a look at what I did do. And I find
I love that.
Yeah, and I find especially when, I've maybe had a hard day, things were maybe stressful, or I just wasn't feeling great, looking at the day and holding myself accountable for the stuff I didn't do, of course, but then also taking a positive spin on that as well and realizing, hey, okay, I didn't do that, but look at all the things that I did do today. So instead of kind of getting down on yourself and judging yourself for a million things that you could have done, you just have a different perspective on it, and I find that helps me relax a little bit better and unwind, and thus become less stressed for the next day when I have to kind of do it all over again.
Yeah. And what this is actually the first time that you've told me that, and I absolutely love it because it's so easy to, especially at night, you wind down, then you're lying in bed, and it's so easy, for me anyway, certainly, that train of thought gets going, and it's like, it just goes, and you're like, all the things that I didn't get done today, and now, I'm going to have to do this tomorrow, and I already had a task list for tomorrow, and you sort of get into, and my train of thought tends to, it does a loop, and then it goes back on that same loop, right? So it's easy to focus on the things that you didn't accomplish because, especially when you work in digital media, I mean, there are a million and one things you could do on any given day, right? There's never a true end. There's never a point where you get to the bottom of your checklist and you say, that's it. I did 100% of everything. There's nothing left to do. There's never that moment. So I think that's a hugely important habit to have, is acknowledging what you've accomplished and to feel good about that. That, you know, look at all the things that I did get done. I think that's excellent.
I find it really helpful for me to kind of unwind for the night and again like create that work-life not balance but maybe line. When there is no line. Like you don't go to an office and then you come home and then you just have the luxury of not thinking about work. Right? Like for us, like we have no physical separation, so it's really hard to kind of define that for you. But for me, like the 8:30 cutoff time, and then also the whole process of running through my day, like that is where it separates for me.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's the other thing that accomplishes to me is that, you know, when you work on your own, which we do a lot, we work together and we work at events where we're, you know, very social around people, but really a lot of the work that you do is on your own, alone. And that can be kind of tough, right? Like, and especially when, again, like you're just absorbing so much stuff. And so then at the end of the day, to not feel like you've accomplished, you know, what you set out to accomplish, and, you know, there are all these negative comments that you had to read or whatever it is, and then working on your own, like those factors kind of like compound each other and can create a lot of negativity and stress and anxiety, I think. So having things that help you to manage that and recognize that, you know, it's very easy to sort of fall into a negative space if you don't have these things in place. So I love that.
We were also saying one of the big things is too how it is really easy, since we work in digital media, to work from our bed. That it's nice to have like a place in your home that's also your office, where I've created a place in my home where I'm by a lot of windows, so it's bright. I don't feel like I'm like in a little box. I have plants around. I have some bright colors. Like it just brings me happiness, where I like to go get out of bed and sit down and get work done. So it's like a nice positive place, and that helps you a lot better, because since our laptops can go anywhere with us, if we want to just lay in bed, unfortunately you can do that. So it is making your nice little space at home or wherever you're going to be working from, and then that brings out the more creative things in you as well.
Yes, and that's, you know, we're talking about that too, like when you work in a really unstructured way, in an unstructured environment, it's up to you to define what that structure is going to be, which can be challenging in itself, but it's also amazing, right? Like there's so many people who don't have that opportunity. So I think, you know, as much as we talk about the challenges in digital media, because I think it's important to highlight them so people kind of start having these conversations and they understand a field that is relatively new, what that's like. It's also really important, I think, for us to acknowledge that it's a wonderful gift, right? And a luxury in a lot of ways, that we get to make these choices in how we work and the way that we define those environments and create that structure, because, you know, a lot of people just don't have the luxury to be able to do that. So it is a great gift, but along with that comes a lot of challenges and responsibility too, right? To shape this thing.
Yes, this thing we call a digital life.
Yes, this digital life. We brought it back around there. One of the last things I will say for me that I've had to learn how to do and get really good at over the years is saying no to stuff, especially when you're building your own business. I think this is true in general. But it definitely, when you're building your own business, there's a temptation to say yes to everybody, to everything, and thinking or hoping that it's going to create an opportunity for you, and you can't, ignore potential opportunities. But what happens when you say yes to everything? There are a lot of things that happen, but you can get burnt out. Super fast, right? It's so easy to get burnt out when you're saying yes to everything and everybody, and I had to, just this week, I had to say no to a speaking engagement, just gauging it and thinking, with everything else that I've got on my plate and trying to stay balanced, making good decisions about how to shape my life and my work. I just knew that it wasn't going to be enough of an opportunity or have enough value to do it. And people understand, honestly, when you start saying no, you feel bad or that people aren't going to get it, they'll be upset, they'll whatever, you're disappointing or letting someone down. And the reality is that, life is crazy busy, and you only have a certain amount of time, a certain amount of hours in a day, and you have to make decisions about what to do with the hours in those days. And you can't be everything to everybody. Mm-hmm. So people do get it, when you say, sorry, this is what I've got going on right now, and it's not realistic. And one of the things that I've learned to say too is that I would love to, but honestly I've got so much going on over here that I know I wouldn't be able to deliver something of value
100%,
to do that. And that helps them to understand too. It's like, you deserve to have the best possible speaker or whatever it is. You deserve to have the best person who's going to be able to commit their time to this. I'm not the person who can do that right now, but there's someone else out there. Maybe I can even help you to find someone else who can do that.
Yeah. What a day.
So I hope that something in there was valuable to you. It's certainly a larger conversation, one that we have ongoing, and probably one that we'll revisit again, because there's so many different things that you could kind of talk about in finding work-life balance. But we'd love to hear from you too. As always, please feel free to comment on this, to ask us your questions, or to share any advice that you might have, tips that you have in terms of trying to find balance in your life, or making conscious decisions about how you're going to shape your life and the priorities in your life. We would love to hear some of those. And for anybody else who happens to watch this video, I'm sure that they would really benefit from your suggestions as well. So put that in the comments below, and join us again next week for This Digital Life. Have lunch with us, noon, Tuesdays. We will be here. And thanks so much for watching today.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.